And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Vanessa Vakharia. Known as the Lady Gaga of math education, Vanessa is founder and director of The Math Guru, a super cool boutique math and science tutoring studio in Toronto that's changing stereotypes about what math education looks like. She is also the host of the Math Therapy podcast, author of the Math Hacks Scholastic book series, and lead singer, guitarist for the rock band Goodnight Sunrise. She is also author of the recently published book, Math Therapy, which is the focus of today's webinar. And now I will turn it over to Vanessa.
Thank you for the glowing intro. Thank you for everyone for typing all this stuff in the chat. It's so helpful to see. I'm going to throw this up here right now in case some of you are like, I want your slide deck. I'm going to post this QR code at the end as well, but I want to post it here now just so you know you're going to get it. I know some people like to take notes. Some people just want to know they're going to get it. I love Instagram. I love Twitter. So if you're like, I want to take pictures of slides and post them, you're totally welcome to, but just know that you're going to get the entire slide deck at the end. So you don't have to be furiously scribbling notes. So that's the first thing I was going to say. Also, I'm very thrown off because I really thrive on external validation. And I was hoping to see people laughing at my jokes in the little Zoom panel, but I can't see any of you. So you're going to have to just kind of be active in the chat and say, ha ha ha, when you think I'm funny. That's my personal request to you. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. Okay, great. Oh my God, you guys are so great. I'm seeing all these little laughy face emojis. Thank you. I love you all already. I'm coming to you from Canada. I'm in Toronto. It is 7 p.m. here. It is cold. It is frosty. It is fall. It is back to school. And it is the perfect time to talk about math trauma and how to heal it, in my opinion. I would love, before we get started, for anyone who's here right now who thinks they have their own math trauma or feels anxious around math, just type the word me in the chat right now. Me, double me. Oh my God. Yes. Like not yes, like I don't want you to be anxious around math, but I love this. Thank you for sharing. I hope everyone is looking at this feeling like they're not alone. If you're experiencing math anxiety as a math teacher, it is totally normal. I personally, I'm a high school math teacher. I have my own math anxiety. And I just want you guys to know I'm extra excited. I'm excited for everyone to be here, but I'm really, really excited for those of you who have your own math anxiety. Just like Tony said, it is your greatest strength in the classroom. It allows you to really empathize with students. And for those of you who aren't anxious around math and have never experienced it, thank you for being here so that you can understand more what so many of our students and educators, mostly our students, are going through so that you can help them heal and build better relationships with math. I will be keeping my eye on the chat, just kind of with one eye. If there's anything burning in there, I'll bring it up, but otherwise just feel free to use it, engage, do your thing, and I'll read it all at the end. We are going to be talking about math trauma and how to heal our relationships with math. I already know I have way too much stuff in this slide deck. It happens every time because I wrote an entire book called Math Therapy, and everything I talk about is in that book, and I want to talk about it all here, and I will not be able to. That being said, there are 5 steps to the math therapy process, which we'll go into, and I'm just going to give us a little glance at each one because I want you guys to get an idea of like this framework and how you might be able to better use it to heal your own math trauma and that of your students. So let us begin our journey. All these resources, by the way, that I mention, any activities I mention, that QR code will lead you to the slide deck as well as templates for any of the activities I talk about. I want to begin with this. Okay, this is one of my favorite quotes. I'm going to read it to you. Joe Bowler says, math more than any other subject has the power to crush student spirits, and many adults do not move on from math experiences in school if they are negative. I want us to take that in because we're talking about, we're all adults probably here. Why are you not able to access the slide deck? Does it not work? Okay, we'll deal with this later. We're going to deal with this at the end. If this is happening, I will fix this. I want to bring this up because the thing with math is we all know adults who are just like, oh, I hated math, whatever, but it doesn't matter. I don't need to use it anymore. I would argue that every single adult I meet, and we'll talk about this a little more like later, um, it does something to us. You know, that feeling that we're not math people, that we can't do math, actually does something a lot deeper than simply push us away from a math career. I love all the teachers. You guys are all amazing. But I really believe that any educator or adult that has the privilege of teaching math to a young student in any way, whether it's in an interdisciplinary way in your social studies class, whether it's in a math classroom, we have this opportunity that nobody else does. And let me tell you why. Most kids, okay, guys, like well over 50% of kids at a young age are taught in some way or another that they are not math people. Translation, they are taught that they are born at a deficit when it comes to math ability. They're told things like, well, you didn't get the math gene, or you have other strengths. You're more of a creative person. Just focus on those things. Or, oh, don't worry, your brother's good at math. You're good at the art stuff. They are given this message that math is this thing they're just born not as good at as anyone else. And what happens is when we believe a thought like that, it's called a limiting belief. It is a innate fixed mindset limit of what we can do on this planet. We naturally start thinking of what other things we can't do. So that same kid like tries out for the soccer team, they don't make it. They start thinking, maybe I'm just not meant to be an athlete. You know, they like bomb at karaoke one night and they're like, forget it, I should never join a band. They like, I don't know who's watching Love is Blind here, but you hear this narrative. Like, you know, you get dumped and you're like, you hear these stories of people being like, I'm unlovable. I'm never going to find love. I'm meant to be single for the rest of my life. And it might sound like a far stretch, but I really believe that so many of those beliefs begin with the limiting belief that you are born at a deficit when it comes to math. So we here, all of us in this group, have this chance to bust that myth, to show a kid that that actually isn't true. And in doing so, to open their eyes to, instead of asking, what else can't I do? To start asking, okay, hold on a second. If this lie is true about my math ability, what else can I do? And I know we all want to have kids leaving our classrooms believing that they're capable of their wildest dreams, because what else is life if not that? But also as a planet. I mean, I'm thinking about the things going on in the world right now, the inequity, the fact that we haven't like solved racism or climate change yet. We need this generation growing up thinking just because it hasn't happened yet, it doesn't mean that there isn't a solution. It doesn't mean I should stop trying. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for being here, for investing time in this. Because I think one of the most powerful things we can do is bust that myth for students. And now, you know, the reason I'm so passionate about this, actually, before I tell you my story, I want to say one other thing. You've probably seen this, but it's so important. People don't hate math. Kids don't hate math. They don't like hate the number 3. They hate being confused, intimidated, and embarrassed by math. Sometimes I get the question, why math? Like, why is math anxiety a thing? Why don't we hear about like, you know, geography anxiety? I mean, some people have anxiety around geography. I actually totally do. But the reason math anxiety is so pervasive is there are a lot of reasons. One I want to bring up right now is what this quote is about. We talk about math like it's just another subject, but the truth is, math is what we associate in our society with intelligence. I'm not saying it's fair and I'm not saying it's right because it's not, but think about it. When someone's really good at math, we call them smart. We don't call Beethoven smart. We don't call Picasso smart. We call them talented or creative geniuses. We reserve the word intelligent for those who are good at math. I'm in a band, like Margaret said, and don't worry, I'm going to brag about it later and make you follow me on Spotify. But I will like play a show and like, guys, I'll play a show of songs I have written. I'll perform it. I'll be playing my guitar. I'll be singing. I'll be doing all sorts of stuff. I'll get off stage and like a fan will come up to me and be like, oh my God, you guys are so amazing. Like, is this your job? And I'll say, no, I'm a math teacher. And they'll pause. And what do you think they'll say? You must be so smart. And I'm always like, why didn't what I just did on stage make me smart? Like, it's a very interesting thing where we always jump to intelligence. And I say that because when kids don't feel like they're good at math, they feel like they're not smart. And that is a huge, huge thing. And so that's kind of what we're fighting. And that's what we're up against. And there's so much weight around math ability. And that's why one of the reasons there's so much anxiety around being good at math. So this is a bunch of stuff about me. Don't worry about it. I just put it up here so you could be like, Vanessa, she does things. But what I do want to talk about is why I'm so passionate about this. And that's because when I was in grade 11, I failed grade 11 math not once, but twice. I went to like this very academic school and I just wanted to be a rock star and marry Keanu Reeves, to be honest. I'm actually wearing a Keanu shirt right now. My dreams have not died. I'm in a rock band, but Keanu, not yet, but growth mindset, not yet. Anyways, I was always told, well, Vanessa, like people like you aren't good at math. Like, or, you're creative and artsy. You don't need to worry about the math. I was always given this idea of like, I wasn't expected to be good at math. In fact, people like me weren't supposed to be good at math for a variety of reasons we will not get into. Anyways, I passed grade 11 math with a 57 in summer school. And my parents are like, we need to do something here. And they send me to this magical alternative school. There's 100 kids in the entire school. We like take elevators to class. We call teachers by their first names. We don't wear shoes, like very hippie vibes. Anyway, so I walk into my grade 12 math class and I say to my math teacher, Eva, who I'm still best friends with to this day, I say, you're going to have a lot of trouble with me. I'm not a math person. And she looks at me and she's like, you're not a what? And I said, oh, I'm not a math person. And then she said the words that would change my life forever, which were, that's not a thing. And guys, I got a 98% in grade 12 math. Don't applaud. I know we don't care about marks anymore, but the point is that everything changed for me. Now, it's not like all of a sudden I became a math genius. She was an amazing teacher, but my approach to math changed. The fact that she believed in me, that she had no doubt that I could improve my relationship with math, that when I was stuck with something, I would ask a question. I would seek out other resources. I wouldn't just default to, well, I'm not a math person, so there's no point in trying. And that's one of the, I left that class and I literally thought, oh my God, what else can I do? And I started a band. And a million other things, but I really made it my mission. I was like, I cannot believe that so many people are running around this planet thinking math is this thing you're just born with and you either can or you can't. And there's all these limiting beliefs that we could just quash. And that's why I'm here. So I got my master's in math ed. I wrote a thesis called Imagining a World Where Paris Hilton Loves Math, where I really started investigating where some of the inequities lie in representation in Hollywood of mathematicians and in real life. And the rest is history, as they say. So I wrote a book. Margaret told you about it. It did come out on Keanu Reeves's birthday, September 2nd. He's a Virgo. I'll post the link to this later. And what you're seeing today is my life's work. Really, it's everything that has culminated in this book. I've been doing math therapy, professional development for years with my own students at my tutoring center, with educators, with classrooms. And now it's turned into a book. And we are going to go over the key point of it today, the framework that is math therapy. What is math trauma? How do we heal it? I'm going to put this out there. Lisa McConchie, who's a brain-based learning specialist, says, a student's emotional relationship with math is foundational to their cognitive relationship with math. I always say this. Because there's always a couple of people who are like, oh, okay, come on though. For kids to get rid of math anxiety, they just need good instruction. They just need good curriculum. They just need good content. And I want to say to all the amazing educators out there, you probably do have amazing content and curriculum and pedagogy. But if a kid is literally in an anxiety state where they're like mentally hyperventilating into a paper bag, we can't reach them. And that's why it's so important to do this work. I know there's always the issue of time, but a lot of these things are quick fixes. And I also think some of the things that are not quick fixes that take a bit more time, it's worth the time in the end, because the absenteeism and the avoidance that results because of math anxiety, that ends up causing you so much, you're spending so much time on that stuff. And dealing with the student's emotional relationship with math can really put you ahead of the game and save you time in the long run. So math therapy, what is it? In math, we always have to define our terms. So I think it's really important to know what we're talking about here. Okay, so math therapy is a framework for working through math trauma to free someone from the mindset that they can't do math. The goal is to help every student cultivate hold on, a mindset in which they believe they're capable of anything starting with math. I even want to go one step further and say the goal here is for every student to feel this much better about math. That's it. The goal is not every student gets a A. The goal is not all of a sudden someone goes from I'm not a math person to like I'm a math genius. The goal is this much, because as soon as someone feels that much better about something they never thought they'd feel better about, they begin to be hopeful. The door opens. And that's our goal. Right at the beginning is just that little bit of improvement. Now, I have to say, I started math therapy as a podcast, and it started because I'm the person in Ontario they call whenever there's like, math scores, this, that, blah, 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 whatever. I always end up on the news. And every time I go on the news, I don't know if you guys know this, you probably do. There is like a stereotype that journalists became journalists because they hated math. Every journalist tells me that. Every TV host, every time I get on there, they'll pull up their paper. I don't have any paper, but they'll be like, okay, Vanessa, the math guru. Oh my God. Oh my God. This is why I became a journalist. So I'd never have to do math again. And like literally, I watched them go into a trauma response. I'm not even kidding. And I'm always like, okay. Anyways, this one time, I go on the news. This is 6 years ago. And this is national news all across Canada. And the host does the same thing, but we're on air, like it's filming. And he's like, okay, we have Vanessa, the math guru here. Oh my God. And then he starts being like, I hate math. I hated math so much. I was so bad at it. I always needed to use my toes to count to 20. Takes off his shoes, takes off his socks, and begins to count to 20 on live television being broadcast to millions of Canadians. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. First of all, like, dude, are you okay? Second of all, I'm like, I know you can count to 20. So why are you going into this like thing of it was watching a math trauma come to life, and so many people will brag about how they're bad at math and they can't do it. And I find it really interesting because it's such a clear response to a deep-rooted anxiety. So I left and I was with my friend and she was like, these people need math therapy. So I started a podcast. Won't go into the podcast, but there's 6 seasons. The latest season features educators like Joe Bowler and Peter Liljedahl and Dan Meyer and Crystal Watson and Deborah Peart and people you probably know and love. But the earlier seasons actually, at first, I was literally interviewing like people on Twitter and Instagram or friends that just had math trauma and actually walking them through what I called math therapy, which we'll talk about in a second. But the whole podcast is all of these different perspectives on how to deal with math trauma, which I've now turned into a book. So before we get into the 5 steps, what I would do with guests and what I now do with educators and with students and have been doing for over 10 years, but I've now formalized into a process, I want us to talk about math trauma. Because I know for some of you, you're probably like, okay, I've heard of math anxiety, but math trauma. And I will also say, I often get the response of like, math trauma, like, don't you think that's a bit dramatic? So I want us to, again, define our terms, but also talk about the difference between math trauma and math anxiety. So I want us to take a breath, really get into this. This is what math trauma is. This is all it is. It is a negative experience with math that sticks with you long after the experience is over. It's not an event. It's the experience of the event. And I say that because you and I can, we can both write a time test and you can leave and be like, that was amazing. And I might leave and have had a horrible experience of that. Maybe I like blanked out. I knew the answer, but the time stressed me out. So I didn't get it right. And then my teacher got mad at me and I felt like a failure, whatever it is. And that's just stuck with me. So it's not the event because 2 people can experience an event completely differently. So it's the experience of that event. Why it's so important to think about this like this is I almost want all of you who put in the chat that you had your own math anxiety. Hold on, I want to see what I have. Okay, yeah, one sec. I want you to think, for those of you that have your own math anxiety, keep all this in mind as I'm going through the next little section, because I'm going to ask a follow-up question. I want to see how true this rings for you. So math trauma is a negative experience with math that sticks with you long after it's gone. But there's more we need to know. Obviously, we are not therapists, most of us, we are educators, and there will be trauma and things in our classrooms with our students that are beyond our scope to deal with, and we have resources to go to for that. So I don't want you to think you're dealing with anything that's not already within the scope of your practice. We are talking about little t trauma. It's also called sneaky trauma. It's also called micro trauma. These are things that might seem benign. They might not, but things that can be negative experiences that stick with you. It can be something like a lack of representation. Every single textbook you open for all of your schooling never has a person that looks like you. You turn on Netflix and you have yet to see a single movie where the cheerleader is good at math. I challenge you right now. I've done this with thousands of educators. Not one person can name me one movie where the cheerleader is good at math. If you're a cheerleader, you start to think, I don't belong in both worlds and I have to choose. That conflict of identity can be traumatic. It might be an undiagnosed learning difference. It might be just being told, don't focus on math. You have other strengths. It could be being compared to a friend or a sibling. It could be being made fun of in class. It might be being bullied by a friend, something a little more obvious. It might be being told, even you, though you got the right answer, you got it the wrong way, so it doesn't count. You're basically being told your thinking is completely worthless. Now, to top that off, imagine that you experience several of these micro traumas, or like, somebody keeps telling, one person tells you, don't worry, you're a creative person, like, don't worry about math. Then, next year your teacher's like, you're a creative person, don't worry about it. You're not good, don't even worry about math. And you hear that enough times, you really internalize that. So, I mean, I'm only naming a few things, but I want us to broaden our mind to think of these everyday things that can actually form what is a wound. So Gabor Mate, UBC, Canadian, explains trauma this way. Trauma is a wound. You scrape your knee. Imagine when you get a wound, here's what happens. You scrape your knee and there's a few options. Number one, it doesn't really heal, right? Like it still gets infected, whatever. And anytime anything triggers or touches that wound, you're like, ow. Like you put on jeans, which has nothing to do with falling off your bike, which got you that scrape, but you put on jeans and it triggers that wound. Similarly, you have a math trauma, and now anything that reminds you of math triggers that trauma. Option number two, you don't really heal it. You kind of deal with the symptoms. You build some scar tissue. You're kind of fine. But scars are rigid. They don't grow. It's not horrible, but it's like you're never really growing. You're just kind of coping. And option three is you really heal your wound, right? You really heal. And that's why I think it's so important to deal with math trauma. Now, I say math anxiety is an outward manifestation of math trauma. We are kind of lucky in a way as educators because we see the symptoms. We get to visually see our kids go into trauma responses. They'll go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. They go into fight. They're arguing with us. They don't want to do the work. They go into flight, avoidance. They don't show up for the test. They go into freeze. They get their paper. They can't answer the question, even though they know what's going on. They go into fawn. They really want your approval. I mean, I'm just naming some of them, but this is what looks to us. This is what we see as math anxiety. Great. I mean, not great, but like we don't want them to have math anxiety, but when we see it, we can treat it. So by the time they're at math anxiety, we kind of know that there's a trauma wound and that healing needs to happen. I love anxiety management tips. Like I love breathing exercises. I love mindfulness. I love gratitude practices. Those are great at managing symptoms. But at the end of the day, we want our students to really heal. So I want to pause for a second and give us like a minute for those of you, like now that you've heard all this, especially those of you who had, professed to have math anxiety, even those who didn't, have you had an experience with math trauma, do you think? And if you're, and so put in the chat, you can just say yes, or you can quickly tell me what it was if you want to share. And I'm wondering if you're feeling, remember how I said it's a negative experience that sticks with you, if remembering it right now is giving you a feeling in your body. Like, I'm curious. Okay, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do this. That's not that long, but we're doing it anyway. Cartoons. Okay, I'm going to check that out. Oh, Catherine, I do not like that. I also hope I'm not triggering any of you because we're going to heal. But like, if you're remembering that moment right now, notice that feeling in your body that's being brought up years later, right? Like that's how it sticks with you. Science trauma. Yeah. Former gifted kid. Oh my God. So that can be traumatic too. All labels can be traumatic, especially those that tell us, like gifted, that we're supposed to be innately smart. And when we make a mistake or something, we feel like all of a sudden we've lost our gift. I'm here, I'm seeing a lot of time tests in here. Oh, Daniel, cute. Yes, vicarious math trauma for sure thing. Wow, a couple of people saying gifted in here. Oh my God. First of all, I'm sorry that any of this happened to any of you. Comparisons to siblings, oh, word problems. Thank you guys for sharing this. I think it's really important to even see like the wide range here. I've actually never had so many people say giftedness in one seminar. Oh, a public ranking of who passed the minute math test. That happened to me. That happened to me. Yeah, not feeling like you don't know what's going on and no one's there to help you. Like, thank you guys so much for sharing all of that. I know it's like, you're sharing like a trauma experience. You're experiencing it as an educator. Yeah. Fear of not knowing the right answer right away, for sure. Generational math trauma is for sure a thing. Oh my gosh, I could do a whole other seminar on that. Okay, we're moving on, but thank you guys. You can keep typing in there if you want. Thank you to everyone for sharing. Hopefully this gives everyone kind of an idea of like, this is pervasive and we're educators in here. Okay, so let's go through the 5 steps because I'm determined not to run out of time. And I actually want to kind of go, like, I've just depressed you by being like, oh my God, everyone has trauma. I want to talk about healing. Okay, I want to talk about how we can all heal, like realistic things we can do to help students heal and help ourselves heal. So in this framework, there are 5 steps. Okay, the steps are myth bust, moderate, motivate, makeover, measure. They don't mean anything to you right now. No worries. I'm going to, yeah, Tamika, what's up? Okay, so I'm going to start by telling you guys what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down how I did these 5 steps with one person. Because in the beginning, I was actually doing this with my students one-on-one all the time, then in group settings, and then on the podcast, again, one-on-one. So I think it'll actually help for me to show you guys like just the sequential order of the steps. Again, this is like I had 1 hour with Tamika on my podcast. 1 hour. So like this is a very abridged version of what you would do, but it'll give you an idea. So here's what happens. I meet Tamika at a bar. Tamika's like, oh, like I work in radio. And I'm like, oh my God, radio, cool. I have a podcast. It's called Math Therapy. And she's like, literally looks like you know how people have that reaction, trauma response, where they're like, oh, math, like they look like they're going to throw up. You're like, are you okay? She was like, I hate math. And I was like, oh my God, you should come on my podcast. And she was like, I'd rather die. And I was like, okay, cool. Anyways, I tell her the whole story I told you guys about failing grade 11 math twice and how I overcame it and la, la, la. A week later, I get a call from her and she's like, I actually would like to come on your podcast. Great. She shows up. Now, for the purposes of the podcast, step 1 is done because step 1 is myth busting the myth that there is such a thing as someone who can or can't do math. She has never heard a story about someone who failed math repeatedly and then became a math educator. So in her mind, she's kind of like, I guess I believe you. Like, I've never, I'm curious enough to come on the podcast because I believe you and I've never heard that before. So I've in a way already done step 1. We're moving on to step 2, which is moderating math trauma. This is a hard one because I want to find out what's happened with Tamika without like being like, tell me your trauma. Like, I don't want to like freak her out, but I'm like, can you tell me what your experience with math was like? And she says, honestly, there was nothing crazy that happened, like oh my God, Crystal. Okay, sorry guys. Crystal has entered the chat. She's the best. You should all follow her later. Okay, who cares? Back to Tamika. No, I care. Step 2. I'm like, Tamika, what's up? She's like, I don't remember having any bad experiences with math. In fact, my parents were always really supportive and they just told me I had other strengths to focus on and they never put any pressure on me around math. Now I'm thinking, interesting. Like, of course, her parents are well-intentioned. We all are. We're not trying to traumatize people. But I suggested to her, I said, I wonder if that gave you the impression that like you couldn't, you weren't really good at math, so you shouldn't try. And she was like, it might have. Then she tells me, she's like, oh my God, it's so crazy. I got diagnosed with ADHD last year. By the way, Tamika is 29 when we're recording this podcast. So she's like, I got diagnosed with ADHD and I've been on Ritalin ever since. And it's amazing. I'm not here to push drugs, but I did say to her, I was like, have you ever thought about doing math on Ritalin? She was like, no, but it would probably be a totally different experience. That's the end of step 2 in this case. She's started to think about, maybe I did get the impression that I wasn't a math person. And B, she's like, I did go my entire high school with an undiagnosed learning difference. And now I have resources I didn't have then. Maybe it would be different. Cool. We're on step 3. Step 3 is motivating. How do you motivate the student who's like, okay, cool. I guess like I could do math if I wanted to, but I don't really care. In this case, Tamika had come to me because she was motivated for 2 reasons. Number 1, she wanted to apply for a job in radio where you literally do this. Okay, you're on set in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Like you have to count down. And she was like, I'm too anxious around math to even do that. So I'm like, this is amazing. It's not like she's like, I want to be an engineer next year. I'm like, okay, you want to count down from 5. Like I can get you there. Again, remember, this is about just building that relationship this much, right? Like, fine. She also was in credit card debt because she had gone to Aritzia. She had seen these jackets for sale. She had miscalculated the sale price, got to the cash register. The cashier told her the correct price, and she was too ashamed to say she did the math wrong. So she bought the jackets anyway and then never wore them because she felt so guilty about it and went into credit card debt. So I'm like, girl, this is good motivation. She's kind of like, I need to like, it's funny because I'm like, for that second scenario, she doesn't even need math skills. She needs the confidence. And I don't even know that confidence is the right word. She needs the sort of like the okayness with saying, hey, you know what? I calculated that wrong. No big deal. But she felt so insecure about that and so like worthless because of that. She didn't want to admit it. So that's all we're trying to actually get her. And with our students, it's often that we just want them to feel okay enough to ask a question and not feel if they ask a question, it makes them this like horrible, unintelligent person. So great, we have motivation. Now we're on step 4, which is making over your math story. I don't know how many of you guys do mathographies with your students. I spend a lot of time talking about it in the book. I love the idea of really investigating our narratives around math. What I'm going to do with you today and what I did with Tamika is something I call the choose again method. It's a very abridged version of that. All it is remember, I said I want Tamika to leave this podcast with feeling this much better about her ability with math. She came in here with the thought that she verbalized, which is, I am not a math person. In the choose again method, we just take that thought and we choose a equally accurate but more empowering thought. So I asked her, I said, look, you keep saying I'm not a math person. Would you feel comfortable saying instead, I don't know how good at math I am yet? And she was like, yeah, that feels actually accurate. I get goosebumps at this step. You might be like, what? But I'm like, no, this is a huge deal. To have someone start, come in with, I'm not a math person, I can never do it, to, I actually really don't know. That is a huge win. That is a door opening. So she does that in step 4. I'm feeling great. And now we're at step 5, which is measure. And measuring is showing the person, measuring progress in a way that's meaningful to whoever you're dealing with. It's your classroom, it's your student, it's yourself. How can we measure her progress? In this case, I wanted to measure it with actual math. I was pretty confident. I was like, look, you haven't done math in years. What if I taught you one thing in math that you never thought you could do that would help you with your like Aritzia issues? And she was like, okay. And I said, I'm just going to calculate. I'm going to show you how to calculate a sale price by starting with just calculating the tax. We're going to do a percentage. Guys, don't cancel me for what I did next, okay? Because what I did is I taught her a trick. We had like 5 minutes, okay? So we couldn't investigate the knowing and all of that. But I taught her that trick of you take 10% of a number. By moving the decimal place, you divide it by 2 to get 5%, you add them together to get 15%. And in Canada, in Ontario, that is the tax. So that actually really helps us calculate sale prices here. So I show her that trick and she's like doing it. She does it 5 times. Yeah, we have 15% tax here. So she does it 5 times. She's like, oh my God, this is crazy. She's like, can I take a picture of this? I'm like, absolutely. She was like, I can't believe how easy this is. And that was the end. That was the end. That was our 1 hour together. She left. All I will tell you guys is she got that job, that radio counting down job. And I've never talked to her again, but she likes every single one of my TikTok posts. She just liked one yesterday, and this was 6 years ago. So I feel that's a win. I feel like that's a pretty big win. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. So that's a very quick version of just how the steps work with one another. But now I'm going to show you guys how to take these steps into the classroom. We're going to be quick because I have a chapter on every single step with all these resources and templates and activities, but I kind of just want to like show you guys what it's about. Okay, I'm taking a breath. We have 20 minutes left before I have to stop. 5 steps divided by 20 minutes divided by 5 steps is 4 minutes each. We can do this. We're ready. We've got this. Okay. Step one. Step one is all about myth busting. Myth busting the idea of what it means to learn, what it means to be good at math, what it means to be a math person, all of that stuff. I know there's so much talk now about like explicit instruction versus inquiry based and la 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 la. And I'm not here to talk about that. Everyone has their opinion, totally cool. But I love my friend Jamie Mitchell said. I was talking to him about this the other day and I was like, do you think like, is there really like, do you really value one over the other? And he said, you know what? At the end of the day, it's not the pedagogy you use, it's the stance you take. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah. If you go into your classroom and your students know you believe in every single one of their ability to build a better relationship with math, the pedagogy is important, but it's not as important as that stance. And I love that because the first thing in step one to me is the word believe. We talk about growth mindset all the time, right? So I'm not going to like go on and on about it, but there's a difference between being like, yeah, guys, our brains can grow and change, and your students knowing you believe in their ability to grow and change when it comes to math. So that is like, first of all, this takes no time. I mean, maybe a little inward reflection, but if you're looking for a quick way to just like level up to step one, really dig in your heart and ask yourself, do you believe every single student not can get a 90 or an A? Do you believe every single student you encounter can be this much better at math? And once you believe that, they will feel it. And that honestly will make a difference. So that's like the easiest like inroad to step one. But I'll take it a step further to my favorite saying when it comes to growth mindset, which is believe, behave, become. We often talk about the belief of growth mindset. Our students kind of get it. They're like, yeah, fine, my brain can grow and change. But actually, research shows it can be really damaging to just kind of like ask students to manifest. I love manifesting, obviously, low key. But in manifesting, we have a saying, which is attention energizes, intention transforms. We can put our attention to it, we can believe, but if we don't set an intention and engage in a new behavior, that manifestation goes nowhere, right? So believe, behave, become is the idea of, yes, let's instill our kids with that belief. Let's believe in them. Let's explain to them how growth mindset works, but then let's give them the opportunity to change their behavior to become that next version of themselves. That might be, let's encourage them to try new ways of studying, new ways of doing math. Maybe you're now doing thinking classrooms. Maybe you're allowing them to collaborate. Like whatever it is, really working with them to say, okay, we believe you can change, but let's try some new things. Again, we have that saying of what is that saying? Trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is like the definition of insanity or whatever. Like, right? We can't just believe it, but then engage in the same behaviors. Like I always think about how I believe I could be a really healthy person, but I never like change my eating habits nor go to the gym, and I still feel not great. And I'm always like, oh, like, what am I doing wrong? And actually, what I'm doing wrong is I'm doing nothing. I'm just doing the same thing I was doing yesterday. So really think about in growth mindset, the most important thing is the behavior. It can be really actually hard on students if you just kind of are like, but if you believe you can get better at math, you can, without giving them the opportunity to change their behavior. And we obviously have like we have systemic barriers. A lot of our students, our marginalized populations actually do. So it actually can victimize them by being like, all you got to do is believe. No, belief is one thing, but then the engagement in behavior. And for a lot of kids, it's validating that maybe they might not have the opportunity to engage in the full behavior they want to. Maybe they want to practice every single night, but like they're looking after a sibling, like that compassion, that rounded approach of being like, it's not just all in your head and I'm here to support you in whatever way I can is really important. Another thing I really love, like, this exercise, which is called I used to think, now I think. I want to give you guys quick things you can do. A lot of times with growth mindset, not with growth mindset, with growth in general, we don't see our growth, right? Like, I don't know if you've ever like seen a friend you haven't seen for a year and they're like, oh my God, your hair is so long. And you're like, really? It hasn't grown at all because you've been looking at yourself in the mirror every single day and haven't noticed the progress. It is really nice to do this activity with students to help them see visually on a piece of paper how they've grown. What I do with students is I say, literally write down 3 things. It can be in math, it could be non-curricular. You thought you'd never be able to do that now you can do. I used to think I'd never be able to ride a bike. Now I can. I used to think I'd never be able to count to 10. Now I can. You'll find it's actually challenging for adults. I find when I do this for adults, they're like, I don't have a single thing to write down. And I'm like, but like, there must be something you thought you couldn't do when you were 10 that you could do now. But because we're so not used to celebrating these small successes, we only celebrate these big wins or our marks or our grades. You call them marks, right? No, you call them grades, whatever you guys call them over there. We call them marks or grades, marks or grades. Anyways, because of that, they often actually miss all the progress they're making. So I get them to write these 3 things down. And then every week, I ask them to add 2 things to their list, one curricular, one non-curricular. At the end of the week, it might be like, honestly, I used to think I would never understand what an exponent was, but now I do. I used to think I could never write a math test without crying. Now I can. If you do this every week, at the end of the year, you'll have like 40 sets of 2 things. You'll have like a kid will have 80 things. They'll be able to see visually how their mind has grown on a piece of paper. And that really brings growth mindset away from an idea to something actual. And you'll find they'll start thinking of other things. Like they'll start being like, oh my God, that's right. Like I didn't do so well on this test. I didn't do so well on this fractions test, but like we were adding fractions and actually I did all my common denominators correctly. And 2 weeks ago, I didn't think I'd even be able to do that. So this is like pretty quick exercise I like to do to show students what's actually going on. One other thing I want to say in this section of myth busting, we have to myth bust the idea of what math is. Math is not just algebra. It's not just numbers. It's not just quick calculations. When we can help every single student see a math skill that they feel good at right now, we open the door to them finding more skills that they feel good at or being willing to build more math skills. Because right now, some of our students think they have 0 math skills. I did a talk with 200 grade 1 to 4 kids last week. Oh my God, it was crazy. You elementary teachers are amazing. I don't know how you do it, but we were coming up with all sorts of things like making friendship bracelets, the math skills, the patterning, the counting, the measuring, like there's spotting trends to see what's in. These are all math skills. And kids really started to be like, oh my gosh, I have all these math skills I didn't even know about. So busting the myth of what being good at math even looks like is a really fun activity. I crowdsourced this with a room of like 200 kids. That was a lot. Don't know if I would recommend that. But like, with groups of kids, it actually worked really well. It was amazing. But like crowdsourcing it, getting people to suggest things, right? And at the same time, you're doing step 5, which is measuring progress by valuing and complimenting them for their thinking. We'll get to step 5, but I'm just showing you it's all interwoven, right? Like there are so many ways you can weave these things together. Okay, so wrapping up 1, small actions you can do. Just believe all students can build better relationships with math, right? 2, give students opportunities to engage in behaviors that will result in different outcomes. And bigger things, I used to think, now I think, actually redefining what math looks like. Those are just a few of the things we talked about. Let's move on to step 2, which is moderating math trauma. Okay, so here's the deal with this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because a lot of this is like what I talked about with Tamika, really getting to know our students, asking. There are a few little things you can do that I'm going to put on the screen. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dear Math, but it's an amazing book. The ask is literally, this is it. Ask your students to write a letter to math. Dear Math, I used to like you. And then when I got to grade 2, it started feeling like you really hated me, especially when you introduced the concept of decimals or like, I don't know, whatever. You start seeing students' relationships with math because they're not writing about themselves and they're writing about an inanimate object. Like they feel more open about it. And yeah, Kristen, exactly. For teachers too, I do this with educators all the time. I get them to sit and write their letters and the things that come out about how math is a toxic X, like you see all of it, but you see details, and that really gives you an entrance point. If a student is writing about how like I used to like you until I had to get up and do these speed drills and you made me feel so stupid, as an educator, you're like, note to self, like, okay, like this time tests trigger this person. That helps. Graphing your relationship with math is similar. Liesel always does this activity. So you're writing a letter, but you're doing it visually, where the x-axis is the timeline and the y-axis might be certain emotions. And on every single coordinate, a student might write grade 5, comma, timed test, grade 6, comma, got made fun of. And again, you start seeing their trauma points. And then finally, I'm putting this up here not to freak anyone out, okay? I'm putting it up here because there are things we do in classrooms that have the potential to trigger math trauma. Not saying they cause math trauma, they just might trigger math trauma, okay? So knowing these things is helpful, because if you know that a time test might cause, might exacerbate someone's trauma, it's good news, because you can then start that test by saying, hey guys, we're going to do a time test. This is not the only measure of success in this class, but sometimes timing helps with fluency. Don't worry about what happens. Take your time. If you don't feel great about this, there will be other forms of assessment you can use later on that have nothing to do with time. Or you can have a conversation about how speed isn't the thing that's associated with math, but it's one math skill you want people to develop. So I'm just saying that what's really good is knowing what things might trigger many students can help you pad that activity, or even make changes if you can. Right? Like if grouping by ability is known to exacerbate math trauma, you can just move to randomized grouping, and that doesn't take that much time. Okay, we're moving on to step 3. I'm aware of the time. I'm aware that I'm taking more than 5 minutes at it, guys, but don't worry, we're doing great. Okay. Step 3 is about that motivation piece, right? What do you do with those students who feel like, I get it, but I still don't find math that meaningful. I don't find any value in it, and I don't really care. This is where I'm going to tell my story that's going to impress you, and I'm going to do it in literally 2 minutes. I'm looking at the clock. I think one of the most important things you can do, research shows that what is the most motivating to students is what is relevant to them right now. When we are just forcing content at them that they don't care about, it doesn't feel good. I would say boredom is there's definitely math trauma that comes from just being bored and not being caring and being told to do it anyway. So one of the biggest things you can do is find something that your students are passionate about and care about, and show them how the math adjacent skills they're building in your class can support them. So here's my story. I have to say this because I need you to be impressed, and you're going to have to act impressed, and I'll explain why after. So you guys know that all I've ever wanted to do is start a band, right? I had no real musical skill, let's say. I tried out for Canadian Idol. I waited in line for 8 hours, sang 3 words of I'll Never Break Your Heart by the Backstreet Boys, and got told to go home, among other things. But after all this math failure stuff happened to me, I wasn't scared of failing anymore. I was like, whatever, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to do it. I'm not scared of rejection. I'm not scared of failure. I know it's an obstacle, not an absolute. So I started a band. We practice every single week for an entire year. We finally play a show. There's 100 people there. I'm feeling really good. We play the show. I leave. I'm outside getting air. And this guy comes up to me and he's like, oh, are you the singer of the band? And I'm like, yeah, I am, thinking he's going to compliment me. And he looks at me and he goes, I just want you to know you're the worst singer I've ever heard in my life. And I don't know if it's because I'm Canadian or what. I think I was just so shocked. I was like, I think I said thank you. I was like, thanks. I didn't even know what to do. But I'm going to be honest, guys. I never once thought of quitting. Yeah, it was totally rude, but he did me a favor. I never thought about quitting. I was like, oh, that's so cringe and awkward that I'm a horrible singer. What do I do about it? Just like when I went to that grade 12 math class and I found out there's no such thing as a math person. I was like, well, what do I do when I get stuck? I don't know if he was American. Actually, he might have been American. I don't think he was, though, as much as I would love for that, to. Okay, so I would love to continue the stereotype that Canadians are so polite, but they're just not. Anyways, I hired a vocal coach. So that's what I did. I hired a vocal coach. And here's the part where you act impressed, guys. Are you ready? This is 8 years later after that moment, and 3 vocal coaches later. This is my band opening for Bon Jovi in front of 17,000 people. Thank you. Please act impressed. Thank you. I love the emojis. I'm being so desperado about this because I have reached the point where when I do this with students and I tell them that I open for Bon Jovi, what do you think they say? They're like, they do not say such a hottie. They say, they say, who's Bon Jovi? Exactly, guys. You think that have a crisis with math education. Like we have bigger problems in the world. The kids do not understand music or rock and roll. It's very depressing. Anyway, so I'm always like, please act impressed. The point is, this is my story, and you all have your own Bon Jovi stories. You all have your story about how resilience and grit and having to practice, having to not give up, all these skills you learn in math class has paid off in an area of your life that really, really matters to you. And on the bottom here, I put my logo of my record company. It's called Rejection Records because to this day, no one will sign us. No one will give us a record deal. And that's it doesn't matter because this is what keeps us going is all of those skills I built in math class. So I'm not going to talk about it here because we don't have time, but I do something with kids called Finding Your Math Superpower, which is just this. It's digging into what they like, what they love, what skills they use there, and how you can help them with those skills in math class. Like, I'm not disparaging the USA. That wasn't even me. That was someone else who said that. Not me. Not me. I think it was Ryan. Ryan, let's blame Ryan. Okay, we are on step 4, which is making over your math story. Okay, I actually love the US, guys. I really do. See, it's Ryan. Okay, sorry. Okay, guys, focusing. We are on step 4, which is all about giving students internal narratives a makeover. Now, I'm going to skip through this pretty quickly because we did this with Tamika. Remember, this was all about the choose again method. I want you guys to just think about this. We have 60 to 90,000 thoughts in our head every single day, and only 10% of them are conscious new thoughts. The rest of them are thoughts. It's our narrative swimming around. If you're the type of person who says, I'm not a math person, I'm so bad at math, I'm an idiot, I always make mistakes, that voice is in your head all day long, right? So if we can help students rewire their thoughts slowly but surely, you are making that environment in their minds friendlier when they are doing a math problem. You are changing their narratives. If they say something to you, I never get anything right, pause them and say, hold on a second, is that true? Do you never get anything right? And have them say to you, well, sometimes I get things right. And then say, I want you to rewire that thought right now. Say something like, I make mistakes just like everyone else. And really be on them. If you're doing this in a class, it's amazing because you can start this and kids will start helping each other. They'll hear a friend say, I'm such an idiot. And they'll be like, whoa, rewire that thought. And the more we can do that, the more our internal narrative changes, our overall narrative about our math ability truly does change. Like what you focus on grows. Thoughts are spells. Like it's not the be all and end all, but we have to start somewhere. And if a kid is sitting there being so mean to themselves and believing the words they say, they're going to get stuck. And you can easily help them just rewire their thoughts and catch yourself too, right? Like I was talking to an educator yesterday and she literally on our Zoom call was like, I'm such an idiot. And I was like, whoa, those aren't just words. It's something someone believes about themselves. You're not just rewiring the words, like the superficial words of their thoughts, but their belief. Going from I never get anything right, asking a kid, do you believe that? Having them say to you, I actually don't believe that. That's the power there. So finally, we're on step 5. We have like 2 minutes left. Step 5 is about measuring progress. Remember in the story about Tamika, I said that, while she was doing things, I was even complimenting her thinking. There is a lot we can do with measuring progress, but I want to just leave us with this. We are taught in school that there is only one way to be good at math, and that the sign of us being good at math comes in the form of external validation. And what is that external validation? Someone say it. Someone say it. You have 10 seconds. There we go. Misty. Grades. It's grades. That's what these kids are being taught. We all grew up in that system. Think about how dependent you are on external validation. I can't actually speak for you. I really am. I try to internally validate myself. I do this work, but I'm still so hungry for external validation. At the beginning of this, I was like, I need to see you guys I needed to see you guys laugh at my jokes, like for real, like I wasn't even joking. So we have this opportunity. Yes, we have grades in most of our schools. I know some of you are doing standards-based grading. Ontario is not doing that. I mean, there are some schools trying it here and there, but at the end of the day, we have grades. We have this ability to show students that they are valued for more than their grades. Fine, you're going to get grades, but easy things you can do, complement their thinking. Literally, guys, I had this grade 6 student yesterday I was tutoring. She was doing a math problem. She was doing bed math. I take a little look. I take a look in the corner and I see her erasing something. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, she looks embarrassed. She was supposed to divide 256 by 4. She had done the long division on the side of the page, and then she had erased it because she didn't want me to see it. She wanted me to think she did it in her head. And I was like, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, nothing. I didn't even need to like do that. And I was like, babe, oh my God, the thinking is the most exciting part. I want to see how you got that. I want to see you're doing long division. I'm trying to think of how I did it in my head. Like I needed to write it down too. We put like hearts around it. We circled it. And she was just like, what? And I was like, have you heard of building thinking classrooms? Obviously she hadn't. She's 11 years old. Doesn't matter. Point is, the valuing of the thinking, it doesn't matter if a student gets something wrong. You can assess thinking. You can complement thinking. When the answer to a question is wrong, you can look at a student's work and say, you didn't get the wrong answer, but that is such a cool way of thinking about it. I want you to show that to the class. That's how I'm going to leave the measure progress. There are lots of other things we can do, but the number one thing you can do to turn turn the value kids feel away from grades to just my thoughts are valued in this classroom and they're valuable regardless of the right answer or the grade I get, is to do everything you can to focus on thinking, to do activities like my favorite mistake, where you find mistakes kids make and you showcase them with their permission to be like, this is an amazing mistake. I've never seen anything like this before. Okay, I'm getting really excited. We have to move on. We have got to go to the end of this. Margaret's she needs to come back here. Guys, you're amazing. That was so fast. You guys said some amazing stuff in the chat. I love you. I wish I could say a million more things. The whole thing is, hopefully I've given you some stuff you can just try, even if it's one little takeaway, even if it's just the first thing, which is believe. You are often the only adult in a student's life who believes that they can build a better relationship with math. Don't take that for granted. It is so powerful. Thank you for being here. Here is my stuff. Here it is. Scan the thing. Let me know if you have an issue with it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your energy. I love the US. I love Canada. I love every country. You're all amazing. No, but for real, I do. And I'm seriously, you guys have an opportunity no one else has. And I just feel so grateful on behalf of our students that they have you in their lives. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you to Vanessa, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight.